Hey, welcome to the Henophess Morning Show. We're actually starting later because I was already doing this on time. I was here doing this on time, but then I found out I didn't have my microphone on. I wasn't actually able to say it. You weren't able to hear me. So if you're on the live, you should probably jump this one instead. Probably not as many people are going to watch. So I'm going to start over. We're on the Henophess Morning Show. Nothing that I talk about here is intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe. It is all intended for educational purposes only. I'm going to talk about the thyroid and also the adrenal and how they work together, what they do, and what you could actually do at home to get kind of a reference on what they're doing and if what you are naturally using to give nutrients to these glands is actually doing something. What you're using, is it actually helping them? Is it moving it the right direction or is it not? We've used this for years. This actually came from my dad, that he learned it from a naturopath 40 years ago that had been using it for many years in his practice. So this has been around for a long time. There's actually a bunch of things we can tell by this blood pressure here. I'm not going to go into all the things. I'm only going to tell you about what it says about the thyroid and the adrenal. And there's some math that tells us what is happening with the thyroid. And there's some, not math, but a little bit of what's going on to tell you what's happening with the adrenal. So we're going to discuss this. This is actually the type blood pressure cuff that I prefer, the Omrons. Tend to be more accurate, specifically the ones that you put on your arm, your upper arm. Those ones, this was an Omron 10. They have some of the newer models that's kind of the updated version of it that it works really well. I took some time in the past because I wasn't always able to have an assistant that knew how to take blood pressure. I needed an electric one that was consistent with what I took by ear. When you wear a stethoscope and you put the thing on there and you pump it up. I wanted something that was accurate with that. And what I found is the Omrons, they were most consistent by ear versus when I took it with the electric cuff. They were more consistent with each other. So I'd recommend using this one. If you're using a different one, they can be highly inaccurate. If you're using the Omron, I would trust it more. If you're using it by ear, you got it from your doctor, those are going to be accurate. And it's a good idea you want it to be accurate to get an accurate number. Okay. So if you've gotten an accurate number here, let's first talk about what it means about the thyroid. What does this mean about what the thyroid is doing? Now, I want you all to know that you can call in at any point. Today, because I started one and then onto this one, maybe more people are going to watch it, maybe not. If you're on live, you can call 816 826 1533. So if you're on live, you could call and ask me about the thyroid. Even if it doesn't have to do with this subject, it might. Uh, I'll see if I can answer that question. If not, I'd still like to hear it because I can set it up for another time. So if you call in, I may be able to give you a brief answer if it's not on this subject, but then we'll defer to another time when I can actually take some more time on that specific question and the topic that covers that question. But if it has to do with your energy, if it has to do with your thyroid or adrenal, then yeah, call in 816. My brain shut down for a second. 816 826 1533. With calculating what the thyroid is doing, we're calculating your thyroid energy in a sense, the possible energy the thyroid could give you. And that number down here, the calculation you want to get down here, this should be between a 120 and a 160 is the average. By age, it does change, but we're just going to call it that 120, 160 for simplicity right now. If it's below 120, there's going to be lower energy. If it's above 160, there's going to be higher energy. And there's going to be problems generally on either side because your body wants a regulated amount of energy that comes from the thyroid. The easiest way to think of this number is the lower it is, the lower the energy is, the higher it is, the higher the energy is. And you have kind of a swing range where everything's going to feel pretty much normal and is going to operate pretty much normal. But outside of those ranges is where, okay, this is a little bit extreme. The engine is running way too fast and we're going to cause problems. You know how on your car, I don't know if you ever noticed it, if it has a tachometer, is what it's called, and it has a scale that it can go to. You'll generally have these in the old cars you can shift, but they'll show you how many RPMs it is. And there's a point where it hits a red line. This is too many RPMs. It's going to burn out your engine faster. There's going to be problems. And that's the same kind of with this. There's a tachometer, and there's a point that you're in the green area, and that's between the 120 to the 160. And then when you get past the 160, it's kind of hitting the yellow and orange and red range, and it's getting up there and going kind of crazy. And then if once you get below the 120, you're getting we generally don't have any colors there because it's not generally damaging on a car if it goes low. But for you, there's less ability. It's kind of like your car is going to stall out if you get too low below these other numbers. It just doesn't have the power to continue to pull forward, to perform, and to do the daily tasks. Let's walk through how you do this math. So you take this top number. Well, you're gonna take the diastolic here away from the systolic. So you write it out like mathematically. It looks like this. So diastolic away from the systolic, and then you add. You'll add the pulse in a second, but 134 take away 84 equals 50 plus 70, which is the pulse here, equals 120. I've already done the math for you, so this is accurate. And not that, I mean, everybody just wants to get on and learn about math, don't they? It's just so exciting. Yay, you're teaching me about math. And then they added math to learning about energy. Woohoo! But this kind of math is awesome because if you're out there taking something natural for your thyroid, somebody said, "Oh, this is amazing for your thyroid," or "Stop using gluten because your thyroid," or this or that. It's like, well, did it affect the energy my thyroid is producing? Did it get it into the regular range? Did it not? Is it actually helping? We are not talking about the thyroid on a medical standing. We're not talking about the hormones it does or does not produce. We're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about just merely on the energy that it produces, its potential for operating, and the nutrients that we're going to give that system. Not that we're going to make the thyroid do anything. We're just going to give it, here's some food. This is what you like to eat. We know that this is good stuff for you. And then as you eat it, it gives you the ability, because you're not starving, that you're not acting out. Have you ever had somebody, they, some of you may appreciate this and some of you not. Uh, my wife, whenever I'm grumpy before I eat, she calls it PMS, pre-meal syndrome. So I get PMS when I haven't eaten for a while, and I get grumpy sometimes. And I see it in kids too. Sometimes when they haven't eaten for a while, they get grumpy and they go crazy and they cry easier, or they're hyperactive or whatever. It just can go crazy whenever they have this going on. And so we have, in a sense, the PMS type thing that happens, the pre-meal syndrome of the thyroid. It's like, I'm hungry, you haven't fed me. And so it can get a little bit of pre-meal syndrome and freak out. But then there's also the opposite of that, which sometimes when it hasn't eaten, it's just, I'm starving, I don't have any energy, I can't operate. And so we need to start to feed it properly. And this is just an indicator of, do we need to feed it some more nutrients? When we feed it the proper nutrients, it's able to regulate, because it can freak out towards going hyperactive and crazy because it's just hungry and it just can't handle itself anymore. Or it could go to the point of just taking a nap. Either way, it needed food. So we're going to feed it. We'll talk about what to actually feed it here in a second. Well, let me back up and remind you. So to do this math, you take your blood pressure would look like this. And I said at the beginning, I like the Omron because we'll get an accurate number. And then you have these three numbers you're going to do math with. You're going to take the 134, take away 84 plus 70. That equals 1. It's funny, like on the screen, trying to actually find out where my hand is tricky. Okay, it's right there. The 120. That equals 120. I promise. The math, I did it more than once to make sure it was accurate. So your 134 take away 80 equals 50. 50 plus 70 equals 120, which is your number. So this number is good. It's in the right range. Now, is that optimum blood pressure for what the doctors are looking at for high or low? No, they want the 120 over the 80 or something like that. I'm not doing that. That's not what we're working on. We're not looking at those ranges. So this may not be flattering numbers as what the doctors are looking for. If you want to know that and what the doctors look at for those numbers, go to them. I'm just doing math and we're looking at the end number. So despite, doesn't matter if you have high blood pressure or low blood pressure or whatever it is, that's something that doctors can deal with. We're looking at the math of it and what the possible thyroid energy is or that it could possibly provide. Okay. And is the thyroid hungry? The lower it is or over high or over low means please feed me. Okay. Before we get into what to feed the thyroid, let's talk about the adrenals as well and their positioning. So we have the thyroid that's right here. Okay, we have our thyroid. There was this. I was at a Star Wars movie one time, and this guy, he gets up and he plays the. He did it really good. It kind of sounded like bagpipes when he did it. But it just reminded me of that. So you have your thyroid here, and it's responsible for a lot of different things. It's responsible for, so you have two glands there actually, your thyroid and your parathyroid. We're going to just say glands, okay? Between them, they have several different responsibilities and they're given nutrients very similar. They're responsible for the movement of calcium in and out of your bones, or at least they help in that process. So they help with your teeth and your bones and your other things like that. They're responsible for what's called your metabolism, which is your ability to hold on to or lose weight and the way you metabolize foods. They're responsible for, they have actually a big role in your energy. They have a role in a variety of different things along those lines. And then you have your adrenal glands, which they're like little hats that sit on top of your kidneys, and they're just right below. If you feel your back and you feel your last rib, that's about where they are, because that's where your kidneys are attached, just above your last rib, and they set on top of your kidneys, just little hats. It's your kidney hats. So your kidney hats, your adrenals, they work hand in hand with the thyroid. If you help the thyroid out, generally the adrenals get better. If you help the adrenals out, generally the thyroid gets better. If one is starting to struggle, generally the other starts to struggle. And they work in concert together. And the main thing they're really known for, that people generally, the main symptom that people have when they're just not quite doing what they're supposed to, is energy, is having actual energy. It's actually easier to see what the adrenals are doing than what the thyroid is doing. You don't got to do no math. You don't have to do math to see what the adrenals are doing. All you have to do is you take your blood pressure like this and say this was setting. You would take it again, but standing. And then when it's standing, this number here should go up from the 130, 134 to a 144. Now, I'm not saying that's optimum blood pressure. I'm not saying that that's good blood pressure. I'm just saying that you should go up by 10 points. Even if it's not at a flattering number right here, if the adrenal numbers are doing what they're supposed to, when you stand up, it should go up 10 points. If it doesn't, then I've seen that when you give nutrients, when you feed the adrenals, that number starts to go up. I actually have a client that she's a nurse and she actually trains nurses, and she comes to me, and what I do, because it's not the same as the medical industry, I'm working with different things, natural stuff, and just giving nutrients to the system. It just didn't connect with her. She's like, okay, this doesn't make sense, but she had her daughter do the stuff and it got better. So she had numbers that were lower standing than they were setting. We started to give nutrients to the adrenals, and bam, she started to feel better. And according to the things that she knew in what she does with training nurses and stuff, it just didn't make sense. But it worked. So she did it, and she refers people to me. So we're not the same. We're giving nutrients. They do what they do. I do what I do, and we both have success within our realms. Again, the way you calculate your adrenals is you take this upper number of the blood pressure and you compare it standing and sitting. You take your blood pressure setting and you take your blood pressure standing. Your blood pressure should be higher standing than it is setting by 10 points. If it is not, there's something going on with your adrenals. There was this young man that was dragged into my office by his ear. Well, not exactly. His wife brings him in. And she brought him in because she was getting freaked out. She was getting scared that he would stand up and pass out. And they didn't have any solutions for him, the route that she tried and everything, going and checking everywhere else. They didn't really have much solution for him, standing up and just passing out. When he came in, his number dropped by 30 points. So that means it was 40 points lower than where it should have, because it should have gone up 10. It went down 30. I was like, oh, whoa, holy cow, what are you doing? Are you extremely stressed or what's going on? And as I discussed with him, I found out that he actually was having issues with energy. And this has gone on for a long time. So he was using energy drinks and he was using caffeine to take care of that energy. But then it was working less and less and less, to the point that he liked to work out and he'd go work out hard. And the pre workout wasn't working for him anymore, giving him that energy to work out. So what did he do? He mixed his pre workout with a monster, right? And that gave him energy for a while. And he did that consistently, even when it stopped giving him energy. He actually stopped getting energy even from a pre workout mixed with a monster. Like, what? Now, the reason that this started to happen is because you have to understand the way caffeine works. Caffeine goes in and it's a bully. It kicks out everything out and it sets in the receptors for our sleep hormones. We have little receptors that have to be the right shape that the sleep hormone can set in. And the caffeine goes and it takes over those beds. It goes and sleeps in all of the beds of the sleep hormone and it stays there. It takes 8 hours to get rid of half of it. To get rid of half of the caffeine you consume, it takes 8 hours to get rid of half of it. And another 8 hours to get rid of more of it. Okay. Now, that means that he had so much that it like puts it in those cells, so it made it hard for him to sleep. But then he was saying by passing out and still tired. Now, what gives you energy from caffeine? It's not that that just prevents you from sleeping. It sets in those receptors. But then your body's like, oh no, we have too many people sleeping in our sleep hormone spots. We need to get our sleep hormones in their beds so we can sleep. And so it's like, what do we do? Okay, we need to get the mean man adrenaline to go kick all of these out, to speed up all of our military and speed up our blood pressure so it causes the body to go in fight or flight and makes the blood pressure go up and the adrenaline, and then now the blood pressure is going fast and the military can get through and we can flush these out and get this out of the cells quicker than otherwise. And that actually is what causes have energy, is the actual defense mechanism, the mobilization of your military to go and kick out all of the caffeine out of the beds of the sleep hormone. And once it's kicked it out of the beds of the sleep hormone, then it's like, now, because you've been building all the sleep hormone, you're going to get really sleepy as it gets kicked out, because all of those beds get filled right back up with the sleep hormone. And then you're sleeping, right? He got to the point that he couldn't go into fight or flight the same way. He didn't have the energy in his adrenal glands. I believe that this, and he didn't have the ability to do that, to get energy from it because he was exhausted. Once we got him off of all varieties of caffeine, every single variety, none of it at all, he actually started to get more energy quicker. And we fed his thyroid and adrenal. And for him, he was young, he was in his 20s. And so, very quickly, within just a couple of weeks, he started to actually have energy and operate and stopped passing out because we fed the glands that created energy versus irritating the glands to create energy. You understand the difference? Feeding the glands that give energy versus irritating the glands to give energy. It's kind of the difference between making a horse run by using spurs or something to just provoke it and making it really just continue to run even beyond its exhaustion point, and then that horse is going to have more problems versus being able to have a good relationship with the horse. And yeah, you got to be in charge and everything like that, but getting that horse to run and move because it has the energy to do so and work well for you, and you're not going to wear it out as much. So I'm not even sure if that's the greatest example, but it's, instead of making it do it, it's giving it the ability to do it. It's giving it the ability to do it on its own instead of forcing it. Do you realize that when cultures have been slaves, when there's been slaves in the past, whether they were slaves on ships or whatever, and they get out of slavery, you realize that those individuals, they've done studies on this, when they've been in slavery, they have a hard time working at that point. They have a hard time making themselves do hard things because they were made to do it for so long. And when we use a lot of caffeine, we actually enslave our energy glands to the caffeine. And if it's in slavery long enough, it doesn't want to work even when it doesn't have it. It especially doesn't work whenever the taskmaster isn't there, when nobody's whipping it and telling it what to do. It doesn't want to do anything. And that's why you have this terrible up and down when you use caffeine for your energy. But when you give nutrients to the glands that create that energy and basically train and help the body to create its own energy and be self motivated, it continues to go and has a lot of ability to create energy. I worked in sales several times. I worked in sales selling solar door to door. Outworked all of those guys. And I never used any energy drinks. And consistent energy outworked them. And then I was working in Ashley Furniture where I was constantly around everybody. I wasn't just off on my own, around everybody. And I outperformed every single one of them on the floor with energy without energy drinks because I had supported my energy glands, the glands that help with energy. There had been a time when I had lower energy, and I used to actually drink one of our herbal formulas. My sisters think this is disgusting. I think it actually tastes quite pleasant. We have a formula that's called glandular energy that helps with the adrenal glands and so, encourages them to operate, stimulates them to get going, gives them some food. And I used to open up these capsules and mix them in some hot water and drink them kind of like a tea. I thought it tasted great. And it made a huge difference because I used to fall asleep midday and just started to have really low energy. And this made a huge difference for me actually being able to have energy. I take 3 capsules and open it up and maybe do that a couple times a day, especially midday is when I would be taking this. If you want to get some, our website is Henophess. Um, if you look at the name of the podcast, it's Henophess Morning Show. Brain just paused there. Henophess Morning Show, just henophess.com. HENOPHESS.com. Any of the supplements I talk about, you can generally get there. So I would use it in making it into a tea. I think it tastes great. It also works just swallowing the pills, but I didn't want to swallow pills. I thought it tasted good, so I figured I might as well have something fun to drink. and that made a difference, and my energy glands were operating better. If I chose at that point to use a energy drink, I would have actually decreased my energy glands capacity to create energy, thereby needing more energy drinks to create energy versus supporting the glands that create energy to create long lived energy. How often do I currently take that formula? I don't. I very rarely take much of anything unless I have a problem. And I haven't had an issue with energy lately because I sorted it up. I supported the gland versus forcing the gland. That makes sense? I supported versus force. I fed versus irritated. Because literally, most of the things that create energy just irritate to create energy versus actually create energy. We've talked about now you can see now the reality of where the thyroid is energy wise and in relativity to what you're going to do nutrient wise. You can see what the adrenals are doing by standing and setting, and then what you can do to support those. I mentioned the glandular energy that we use that helps with the specifically with the adrenals. It also stimulates the thyroid a little bit as well. It can actually help with energy on either side. Thyroid's a little bit more tricky because it needs some nutrients that aren't always easy to get. They aren't always easy for our body to grab a hold of or to absorb because things can be out of the range. So this makes a little shift to something that you can test. This is where it's at, but then there's something that you can test to see what you can absorb. Does that make sense? So I talked about, or maybe I did in the other one. I could now not remember when I was talking before I had my mic on what I shared there and what I shared here. So maybe I'm sharing this again. But if anyone wants to call in, it is 816-826-1533. You can call in and I'll answer any of your questions. Now I got to remember what I was talking about. Sometimes that happens. I actually, my dad said he created this formula that was for memory. And man, it really took care of your memory. It was awesome. It worked for all his clients, but he can't remember where he wrote it down. So with the thyroid's a little bit more complex in what to do. The adrenals generally not as complex. Uh, we can see in this calculation that okay, it probably needs some support, probably needs some nutrients, and then we need to test something else to see can it absorb. And I talked about two things: lack of nutrients or excess toxins. Either you're lacking in nutrients, you have excess toxins. I believe all illness largely comes from those two things, or at least the illness I can help you with comes from two things: lack of nutrients or excess toxins. So either your body doesn't have the building blocks to put things together and make it function, or it's dirty and it needs to be cleaned out. It needs to get rid of that garbage. And if you have cleaned and give the nutrients, your body's designed to heal and repair and fix and keep things operating. And in order to see there's lack of nutrients, excess toxins, but as it goes for nutrients, sometimes you need a nutrient, but you need something else to be able to help you absorb that nutrient. So let's talk about a couple classes of those. With the thyroid specifically, one of the main things it needs to create all of the stuff that it creates for our health, then one of the main nutrients or elements that it needs is iodine. And then it also benefits from having a good amount of oxygen passing through it. And so hemoglobin and those sorts of things are beneficial passing through. And in order to create that, you need iron, right? And in order to use iron, you have to have the protein, the thing that it goes into. And in order to create the protein that the iron goes into, you have to have B12. And so, and in order to use the B12, in order to get the B12 from the bloodstream into the liver, you need the right enzymes to make that happen. Okay, so there's this layered effect. And this layered effect is from the bottom, if you're all the way down with your absorption, you may need to get the right enzymes to be able to help your body to be able to utilize B12. And if that's strong, then now you can utilize B12. And then you're utilizing B12 and creating, able to create the hormones and the protein molecules to be able to absorb iron. And so now you can have iron. And then when you have those in balance, that actually helps to balance your pH, specifically your mouth pH, at about a 6.4. And if your mouth pH is balanced at a 6.4 with that balance of iron and B12, then your body is able to utilize iodine better. Iodine actually works, it gets into the system better, or has been observed that your body uses it better and your thyroid responds better if your pH is 6.4 when you're using it, or close to that range, between like the 6.2 and 6.6 range. So there's these layers of making sure you have these right things to be able to absorb it. So sometimes we're using something, or sometimes we muscle test, or sometimes we do something that says, oh, we should use iron. So say muscle testing. If you're not familiar with that, it's merely the aspect of checking your strength. So somebody generally sticks out their arm and tests the strength. And then you can either hold on to something or ask a question or something like that. And then your body will either short out and you'll have less energy, or it will strengthen its energy, or it will stay stable. If somebody gives you iron and asks your body, do you need iron? And it may say yes. It may be like, oh, yes. But if they don't ask, can you absorb iron? Then they won't know the answer to this question. They say, no, absorb iron. And then it's like, what do you put in? Uh, you would have to find out, you have to ask yes or no questions, because then your body's going to short out. It sounds silly, it sounds a little bit of woo woo, but it's not a bad process to be able to find out generally where things are. And so if you ask, what do I need to absorb it? So you have to figure out what it is. So if you ask, do you need B12 to be able to absorb the iron? You might say, if you take can you take the iron right now and absorb it? And that will be determined by the strength. So muscle testing could kind of tell you those things, but also your mouth pH. Your mouth pH can tell you whether or not you your body would benefit from different nutrients. It's not saying you're specifically just lacking in it, but it's what gets into the liver that matters, that we're looking at. Okay. And so if your mouth pH is below 6.4, you'll generally benefit from using some B12 to utilize the iron. If your mouth pH is above 6.4, generally you benefit from using iron. And you'll see by using those elements that they move. And actually, the best way to actually get your mouth pH up is to take 5 ounces of Concord grape juice and crack an egg into it and blend it up and drink it. Oh, Scott, that would make me sick. Oh, that sounds disgusting. You're right. When I first heard that, it sounded disgusting. Like, oh, I've seen those 70s shows where you just crack eggs in it and oh, oh. No, I've seen that. I thought for a long time, no, I'm not going to do this with clients. And then I was like, fine, the mouth pH is not coming up. No matter how much B12 they take, no matter what they do, I can't get that mouth pH. And so I was like, okay, I will try it myself. And I mixed the Concord grape juice with the egg and drank it. And my mouth pH shifted. And I was like, wow. Worst part of that is it tastes like grape juice. When I was young, I had a bad experience with grape juice. I loved grape juice when I was little. This is my favorite. But mom would always take the grape juice and she would water it down by at least half. And this one time I realized mom gets that. So I went and got me a can opener. And I went down to the retailer and there was these big cans. These like quart cans or whatever they were. They weren't the small ones and they weren't like the gallon ones. They were the in between cans. And I opened me up one of them and I drank the whole can. I was probably only 6 or so at the most. And then after I drank that can, I opened another one and drank it. And then for the next week, everything that came out of me came out like water and it smelled like grape juice. And since then, I can't stand grape juice. So thank you for, you're welcome for the nice thoughts of that. But that's the worst part for me is that it tastes like grape juice. Other than that, it's not bad. And then I wondered, okay, what about salmonella and that kind of stuff for my personal use or recommending it? That's generally a concern, right? So I started doing some research, and there I found this research paper, and you can look it up. I can't remember which one it is. I'd have to go back and find it. But I found this research paper that talked about salmonella, and they were checking to see how much salmonella does it take putting it in food to make you sick versus putting it in water to make you sick. And there was a significant difference. It actually took a significant amount more in a liquid than it did in food because, as they said, the salmonella was protected through your stomach acid because your stomach acid should be able to kill that kind of thing. But if it's protected in food, it could make it out of the stomach still as salmonella and not have been fully interacted, or it's able to grow and populate. It's more protected with the food than it is if it's just in the liquid. Also, these days, the way that they sanitize eggs and stuff, the salmonella is on the outside. So if you're worried about the salmonella, you can actually take just a little bit of food grade hydrogen peroxide and put that in there. So you can put your raw egg, your Concord grape juice, a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, and that will make it so it kills whatever garbage is in there. But that's one of the easiest ways to get your mouth pH up. And the what's converted me to this doesn't follow conventional wisdom. This doesn't follow conventional belief. This doesn't follow conventional tests. So, what has really helped me to believe it or really to do it is to see how it worked. Some of the things that helped me gain confidence in this when I saw, first off, it started moving mouth pHs. And then it's like, okay, what does actually moving your mouth pH even matter? Why does it matter if your mouth pH is 6.4? And I saw this really drastically in clients that had acid reflux. One of my clients, she would always get, um, she would always burp up acid. She would always have things come up whenever she was pregnant, and nothing natural ever really took care of it. Then when she started doing this, and I found that, oh, she also would always have issues with being anemic. And so when we started testing her numbers, we found her mouth pH was always so much lower. And traditionally, she was just taking a lot of iron whenever she was prepping for a pregnancy, and she would generally hemorrhage and things like that. So we started doing something different. We started giving her a bunch of B12 and using the Concord grape juice and egg is largely the way that she would get her mouth pH up. And as her mouth pH started to come up, whenever her mouth pH was above her urine pH, she didn't have that acid stuff coming up. When it dropped lower, she could use the Concord grape juice and egg and it'd come back up. And she didn't have that acid stuff coming back up. Also, that pregnancy that she did that, she didn't hemorrhage or have any other issues. And her hemoglobin more easily held stable. According to the according to my mentor that told me about using this, he said that it's the closest thing you can consume to a blood transfusion. Now, is that 100% accurate? I don't know. But what I've seen is that it actually makes big differences. And what I want to give you here is not the way to diagnose or prescribe for yourself or anything like that, but a way to see if you're taking natural supplements, if you're doing food, if you're doing other things, how do you see what it does for you? How do you see its effect? If anyone wants to call in to ask any questions, it's 816 826 1533. You can call in at any point. But these tools are here to help you see what did this do? I'm taking this supplement, I'm taking that supplement. This is what I'm taking it for. These are a few things you could do to see, is it helping? Is it actually affecting me? So as you start to use things that get your mouth pH to a normal range, it makes it easier to actually be able to see that this number changes with iodine. This number doesn't get affected so much with iodine unless your pH is in the right range. If your pH is in the right range, then iodine has a greater capacity and it has a greater tendency to affect this number to move it the right direction. And that's why it's important to check your pHs. If you check your pH, then you kind of have an idea. If I balance that, it makes it so I can absorb the nutrients that the thyroid uses most, and it actually seems to get a better benefit from it because this number moves a little bit more. Now you could see that for your own self, the way that it feels, the way that it moves, and test these things out. Those are the main things that I would suggest doing, and what I've seen clients specifically do in helping with these systems. So these systems are very affected by stress. Your thyroid is affected by stress. Your adrenals are affected by stress. And remember, I talked about this young man that came in and he's using a lot of caffeine, and the way caffeine puts you into fight or flight, and it fatigued his energy system. If you're constantly in fight or flight, you are going to fatigue your energy system, your glands that create energy. And so, sometimes just managing stress. And I have a video that I talked about stress. If you want to look back on the stress video, go and do that. But if you do the right things to help yourself with stress, that doesn't mean avoiding stressful things because that's impossible. It means giving nutrients to the nervous system and supporting that nervous system with proper good activities. Still, lack of nutrients or excess toxins. Give nutrients and nervous system. Remove excess toxins through whether it's writing activities or whether it's other principles that help to get rid of all of this negative garbage outside. And by getting yourself to the point you aren't constantly in fight or flight, will actually help your energy glands to be able to operate better. Right now, your energy glands could be being overwhelmed and could be becoming fatigued by constantly being in a state of fight or flight emotionally. Or are you, in a sense, I'm calling it a chemical state of fight or flight because you take in caffeine, it puts you into a fight or flight, right? Are you in one versus the other? If you are either in a fight or flight based on something you drank, or a fight or flight based on something you felt or somebody you're around, that still affects your energy glands. And if your energy glands are constantly being bombarded and overwhelmed, your capacity for creating energy diminishes and diminishes and diminishes until you have no capacity to create energy. When I've had individuals that come in and I take their numbers, and if this number is below 100 and this number is between 20 and 40 points low, at least, so over 20 to 40 points lower, generally this individual is so exhausted that and I'll often say it's when I see those numbers, I'm like, generally people with these numbers, yeah, if somebody came at them with a knife, they'd be like, stab me, I'm not running. They just don't have the fight. They don't have the. It's just like you just stab me. I'm not running. I'm not. It's not happening. Take my stuff. It's not gonna. No, I don't have the energy for that. They actually will get to the point that it takes energy to care. Usually, people are caring people, or there's a lot of people that are caring people. And they have their kids and they love them and they care, and then they get stressed out because it's become hard for them to care. It's taken actual energy for them to be able to care. And I often see that when this number is at least 20 points lower standing to 40 points lower, and then this number is below 100, I often see that people are at that point. That if you add anything else, they just can't do it. That they basically just keep their running lights on and they can't handle anything else. They just can't handle the day to day anything. And it could be down there because they had so much stress. It could be down there because they were drinking overused caffeine. It could be down there because they just haven't fed these glands, the energy glands, like they need to. When you feed those energy glands properly, this starts to wake up. And you can still, like, if somebody's down at that point, you can feed those energy glands and avoid what hurts the energy glands. And the energy glands can start to pick up to the point that person can wake up and have capacity. And sometimes you're feeding the energy glands, and sometimes you're feeding the energy glands and the nervous system. And sometimes you're just feeding the nervous system. When it comes to feeding the nervous system, I'm so blessed to have grown up and had my dad for 40 years work with clients and make herbal formulas that fed different systems of the body. And the formulas that he created that specifically feed the nervous system is one that's called Nerve Restore and Stressless. Nerve Restore and Stressless. Usually we use those together. And it generally takes about 6 of the Nerve Restore a day and 3 of the Stressless. And then, as often as you're stressed, you can take 1 of the Stressless and 2 of the Nerve Restore. I know that sounds like a lot, but your body, it's food. It's less than a tablespoon worth of powder. And we're fighting against the nutrients we get for the day. Are we actually, and if we're not getting it in that, did I have a, oh, that's a text, not a call. All right. So if anyone, we're getting kind of close to the end, but if anyone wants to call in, it's 816 826 1533. 816 826 1533. So supporting those glands, the nerve restore and the stress less, I found that I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to like do all this extra work. I don't have to like change their diet too drastically or anything like that. I just provide a little bit extra food that tastes terrible, so we put it in a pill. And then for the supporting of the glands, we talked about the glandular energy goes a long ways there. And then sometimes we need to do this calculation and we need to check the blood pressure. I mean the mouth pH to see do we need to give a little bit more to help those energy glands? Do we need to encourage them with some more nutrients? And which one would actually encourage those energy glands the best? If you do the things that encourage it, and then you're able to check. You don't have just have to rely on, is this working? Oh yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. Sometimes I've seen that these numbers start to improve before somebody feels better, and I've also seen sometimes they start to improve before the numbers move. But I've also found that if they get these numbers to the normal range and are able to keep them there for 1 to 3 months, they can start to reduce those things they're taking that helped them to get there and get to the point they don't have to take anything and they can rely on diet. Sometimes their diet sucks so bad they have to supplement something extra in to continue to feed those glands because there is a constant need of the nutrients coming in to feed it. So if it isn't in your diet, yeah, you're going to have to supplement it. But if it is in your diet and you've already got them on top, then generally your diet can maintain it. But it generally takes specific targeted nutrients like herbs to be able to begin to fill up the right nutrients for those systems to operate how they should. Tomorrow, actually have something really cool happening. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and I have a individual that is a she has a YouTube channel that she's going to come and we're going to be able to do an interview. So check us out tomorrow. I think that we went a little bit shorter today, partially because we did it twice. But if you have any questions in the meantime, put them on the actual YouTube, put them in the questions section or whatever comments, and